It started with silence. Not the calm, peaceful kind, but the tense, heavy kind that fills a palace hallway when something monumental is about to happen. Imagine it. Buckingham Palace lit up with golden light, Christmas garlands wrapped around marble columns, the scent of pine in the air. Yet beneath the elegance, a chill had settled in. Because this year, for the first time, two names were missing from the royal Christmas list: Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. And the one who made that call? King Charles himself. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. What kind of father bans his own son from Christmas? What would drive a monarch, one who spent his entire life yearning for family unity, to draw such a cold line in the sand? Was it anger, betrayal, or something far more painful? That question would haunt the nation. But before we dive into the chaos that followed, we need to understand how the festive heart of the British monarchy turned into a battlefield of pride, secrecy, and broken love. Every December, the royal family gathers at Sandringham, a place of laughter, photographs, and carefully choreographed appearances. For decades, it symbolized unity. From the Queen's annual walk to church, to the family's post-lunch games of charades, it was meant to be sacred. But this year, insiders whispered that something had changed. A subtle but unmistakable shift. There were no discussions about Meghan's outfit. No debate about whether Harry would bring the children. Not even a token mention of their names in the Christmas correspondence that went around the palace. They'd simply vanished from the plan, as though they'd never existed. And yet, behind closed doors, this wasn't a simple scheduling choice. This was a statement. A royal declaration of boundaries. But why now? After everything. The interviews, the Netflix series, the memoir. Why did this moment become the breaking point? Let's rewind just a few weeks earlier. According to several palace aides, the tension had been simmering for months. Charles had tried to keep the peace, hoping for a quiet Christmas where the focus would be on tradition, not turmoil. He had extended olive branches before, small gestures, private letters, discreet messages through intermediaries. Each one, ignored or twisted. Each one, met with another public sting. Then came the interview that broke the camel's back. Harry, in what was meant to be a promotional chat for one of his mental health projects, made a passing comment. It's hard when the people closest to you are part of the problem. He didn't name names, but he didn't have to. The world connected the dots. For Charles, it was the last straw. Imagine being a father, nearing the twilight of your reign, already battling whispers about health, leadership, and legacy, then hearing your son publicly accuse your own family of being part of the problem. It wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. A royal source described that night in chilling simplicity. The king didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "Enough." And just like that, the line was drawn. Now, to the outside world, this might seem like a simple family feud. But inside the palace, every gesture carries centuries of weight. When the monarch bans someone from Sandringham, it's not just a personal slight. It's a message to the entire establishment. For weeks, courtiers scrambled to contain the fallout. They drafted statements, prepared alternative narratives, and even considered quietly inviting Harry for a private post-Christmas visit. But Charles refused. His mind was set. The real heartbreak? Deep down, those who know him best say the king didn't do it out of cruelty, but out of desperation. He wanted to protect the institution, one insider explained. But in doing so, he may have shattered what was left of his family. And that's where the story takes its tragic turn. Because while Charles was determined to preserve royal dignity, Harry saw the move as one more rejection, a public exile dressed up as protocol. To Meghan, it was proof that she'd never been accepted. And to William, it was validation. He'd warned his father that reconciliation was impossible without consequence. By the time December rolled in, the frost wasn't just on the palace lawns, it was between bloodlines. Still, the royals are masters of illusion. To the cameras, smiles remained polished, handshakes rehearsed. But behind the wreaths and ribbons, there were whispered conversations, sleepless nights, and, most shockingly, a secret meeting that would later redefine the monarchy's future. A meeting that ended with a single sentence. A sentence Charles reportedly uttered in a low, calm voice, but one that hit like thunder. They will not attend Christmas. The room fell silent. A few aides shifted uncomfortably. Camilla, sitting nearby, didn't speak for several moments. And then, with the cold precision of someone who's made peace with pain, Charles added, "It's time we accept what they've chosen to become." What did he mean by that? What they've chosen to become? Was he referring to Harry and Meghan's transformation from royals to global celebrities? Their pursuit of independence? Their public criticism of the monarchy? Or was there something deeper? A feeling that his son had chosen fame over family, spotlight over legacy? That phrase would become the subject of endless debate across tabloids, podcasts, and royal forums. But within the palace, its meaning was clear. The king had drawn his boundary, and this time, it wasn't symbolic. Sandringham was off limits. The family gathering would proceed as planned, with empty chairs, unspoken memories, and a new royal reality. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, in Montecito, Harry and Meghan were said to be in disbelief. They'd anticipated tension, maybe even distance, but an outright ban? That was unthinkable. And yet, that's exactly what had happened. Reports suggest Meghan's reaction was immediate. "Furious. After everything we've endured," she allegedly said to a close friend. "He wants to erase us like we never existed." But Harry's response was different. Quiet, heavy, defeated. For the first time, sources claimed, he didn't argue. He didn't defend. He simply sat down, stared at the email from the palace, and said, "So this is what it's come to." That single line, so human, so weary, captured the tragedy of it all. Two worlds divided by power, pride, and pain. Yet even as Charles made his decision, he couldn't have predicted what would come next. Because in trying to protect the crown, he'd opened the floodgates to something far more uncontrollable: leaks, secrets, and betrayals from within. There were whispers that someone close to the king had already shared details of the ban with a journalist. A single leak that would ignite a firestorm of public outrage. But before that story exploded into headlines, something else happened, something that would deepen the mystery behind Charles's decision and expose the most personal detail yet. A letter. A private, handwritten letter that would soon find its way into the wrong hands. And when it did, it would change everything. Because inside that letter, the king had written something that no one, not even Camilla, was supposed to see. Something that revealed the real reason Harry and Meghan were banned from Christmas. But what exactly did that letter say? And who leaked it to the press? We'll get there. But first, let's rewind to the night it was written. Because that moment, in the quiet of a palace office, with only the ticking of a clock and the weight of a crown on his shoulders, was when the king made a choice not as a ruler, but as a father whose heart had finally cracked. And what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It began with trembling hands and the scratch of a fountain pen. King Charles sat alone in his private study at Clarence House, the fire flickering faintly against the window pane. Outside, London shimmered in December frost, but the room felt colder than ever. On his desk lay a single sheet of ivory paper bearing the royal crest. The first words were already written. "My dear Harry." The rest came slowly, painfully, deliberately. Charles wasn't writing as a monarch that night. He was writing as a father who didn't know how to reach his son anymore. Every sentence weighed more than the crown itself. Each line carried years of unspoken grief, disappointment, and a desperate hope that still refused to die. And yet, this wasn't just a personal letter. It was a final warning. The king's handwriting, though elegant, carried tension. He thanked Harry for his public work, mentioned his love for the grandchildren he rarely saw. But then came the pivot, the moment where tenderness turned into resolve. He wrote, "There comes a time when every man must choose whether he wishes to belong to a family or to a fight. This Christmas, I cannot allow both under the same roof." Those words were never meant for the world to see, but somehow they would. Because within days of being sent, that letter, meant to remain between father and son, would become a weapon. But let's not jump ahead. Let's stay in that room for a moment longer, with the man who'd just written what might be the most devastating message of his reign. Charles sealed the envelope himself, pressing his signet ring into the red wax. He hesitated, staring at the seal as though half expecting it to crack open and erase his decision. It didn't. He called for his aide. "This must reach my son directly," he said softly, "and it must not pass through the private office." Even his tone revealed the truth. He didn't trust his own walls anymore. That's the irony of power. The higher you rise, the lonelier it becomes. By the next morning, The letter was on a private flight to California, addressed only to Prince Harry, hand-delivered by a discreet intermediary. No electronic copies, no digital trails. At least, that was the plan. Meanwhile, in Montecito, Harry was already bracing for confrontation. He'd heard whispers through unofficial channels that his family had made their Christmas decision. Meghan had dismissed them as rumors, but Harry knew better. When the envelope arrived, delicate, cream-colored, and stamped with the royal insignia, he recognized the handwriting instantly. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he placed it on the kitchen counter and stared at it for hours. That's the thing about pain. You sometimes delay it, hoping it'll fade before you have to face it. Meghan urged him to read it. Whatever it is, we'll face it together, she said. So he did. The letter began kindly, even lovingly, recalling childhood memories of Sandringham, of early mornings watching his father feed the horses before Christmas, Massachusetts. But as he read on, Harry's expression changed, from nostalgic to confused, and then to devastated. By the final paragraph, his hands were trembling. Meghan leaned in. What does it say? Harry swallowed hard. He's banning us. He says he can't have us there. The silence that followed was heavy. No words, no tears, just disbelief. It wasn't just the exclusion that hurt, it was the tone. Charles hadn't written like an angry father. He'd written like a man surrendering to inevitability. And then there was that one haunting line. I will always love you, but the family cannot continue living under a shadow of resentment. Meghan took the letter from him, scanning each line with growing fury. A shadow of resentment, she said. He created the shadow. To her, the letter was proof of the monarchy's hypocrisy. To Harry, it was confirmation that reconciliation might never come. Still, something about the letter felt strange. It was too perfectly worded, too formal. Almost as if it had been written with the knowledge that others might read it one day. And maybe, just maybe, Charles knew that was possible. Because within a week, that letter would no longer be private. According to palace insiders, a junior staffer accidentally forwarded a scanned copy to a secure email chain used for royal correspondence tracking. That file, encrypted and confidential, somehow leaked. No one knows how. But by the time the palace realized what had happened, it was too late. A well-connected journalist, known for her anonymous sources, was already hinting at a heart-wrenching royal communication that changes everything. The public didn't yet know what she meant. But inside both palaces, Buckingham and Montecito, panic spread like wildfire. Harry was furious. He's weaponizing it, he reportedly told Meghan. He knows exactly what he's doing. But Meghan wasn't so sure. What if someone else leaked it? She asked quietly. Someone inside. And that's when the story twisted again. Because when the leak investigation began, it turned out the person suspected of forwarding the letter wasn't part of the king's communications team at all. It was someone tied to Camilla's office. Coincidence? Or strategy? Royal aides scrambled to control the narrative, preparing statements that could explain the misunderstanding without fueling speculation. But the media didn't need confirmation. They ran with it anyway. Exclusive. King's painful letter to his estranged son. Charles draws line in the sand. Harry and Meghan not welcome this Christmas. By morning, the headlines were everywhere. And the letter? Word-for-word excerpts appeared in the press. The quotes were devastating. For the first time, the world saw the king not as a stoic monarch, but as a conflicted father. His humanity laid bare. Public opinion split in two. Some sympathized with Charles, calling his letter a dignified act of self-preservation. Others saw it as cruel. Proof that the monarchy valued image over family. But for Harry and Meghan, it was both humiliation and heartbreak. Because now, the ban wasn't just real, it was public. They couldn't respond without fueling more controversy. They couldn't stay silent without seeming guilty. So they waited. And while the press tore the family apart, another message quietly circulated among palace insiders. A message not meant for publication but for containment. Camilla, reportedly livid that her office had been implicated, called a private meeting. She said the leak was a disgrace, one insider claimed. But the way she said it almost sounded like a warning. Because what few realized at the time was that this letter wasn't the only correspondence between father and son. There was a second one, shorter, colder, and written not by hand, but dictated through official channels. It was never meant for Harry's eyes, but Meghan saw it. And when she did, everything changed. Because this second letter revealed something no one expected, something that made the ban look less like punishment and more like protection. What was the king protecting? Himself? The monarchy? Or someone else entirely? That question would haunt every conversation to come. Because whatever was in that second letter, it was powerful enough to tear open old wounds, expose new betrayals, and turn this family feud into a full-scale royal crisis. And when Meghan found out about it, she didn't stay quiet. She made a move that would shake Buckingham Palace to its very core. But what exactly did Meghan do? And how did her response spiral into the most talked-about royal confrontation of the year? That's where things get even darker. Because what came next wasn't just a reaction, it was a declaration of war. And no one, least of all King Charles, was prepared for it. It started with a sound, the soft tap of a champagne glass hitting a marble counter in Montecito. Meghan Markle was pacing across the living room, her heels clicking against the floor like a ticking clock. In her hand, she held her phone, open to the news alert that had just detonated across the world. King Charles's private letter to Prince Harry leaked, full text revealed. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. The letter was meant to be private, personal, a final word between father and son. But now, it was everywhere, on every screen, in every headline, analyzed, mocked, and weaponized. The morning sunlight cut through the California haze, but for Meghan, it felt like winter had arrived early. She turned to Harry. "You know what this means, right?" she said, her voice trembling with fury. "They've set us up again." Harry said nothing. He sat at the breakfast table, his face buried in his hands. His phone buzzed relentlessly with messages from friends, journalists, even old acquaintances who suddenly wanted to check in. It was the same every time, every leak, every scandal, every revelation. The world rushed to dissect them, to pick apart every word, every gesture, every silence. But this time was different. Because this wasn't about an interview or a Netflix deal. This was about his father, his letter, his pain, and someone had turned it into a headline. Meghan slammed her glass down. If they wanted a response, they'll get one. But Harry looked up sharply. "No, Meg. Not this time. We can't keep reacting." It was one of those moments where two worlds collided. The part of Meghan that had learned to fight for her narrative, and the part of Harry that was tired of the battlefield. Still, silence wasn't an option. Not when millions were reading words that painted them as villains in their own story. So Meghan did what she did best. She strategized. Within hours, her team was on the phone. Publicists, advisors, media consultants. The plan wasn't to issue a statement. That would only fuel the frenzy. The plan was subtler, a carefully orchestrated appearance. Something elegant, poised, impossible to misinterpret. A few days later, the opportunity appeared. A high-profile charity gala in Los Angeles. Cameras, reporters, red carpet, the perfect stage. She would attend with Harry. Smile. Say nothing. Let the image speak louder than words. But behind that image, a storm was brewing. Because what the public didn't know was that Meghan had something explosive. A copy of the second letter. The one never meant for public eyes. It had arrived anonymously, slipped through the cracks of royal security. Some claimed it came from a sympathetic palace insider. Others whispered that a member of Charles's own staff had grown disillusioned and decided to expose the truth. Whatever the source, the message was clear. The king's second letter had been written for internal circulation, addressed not to Harry, but to his private secretary. And its contents? Devastating. The letter read like a royal directive, cold, bureaucratic, stripped of emotion. It stated that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex will not be invited to Sandringham this Christmas, in accordance with the King's personal request and advice from senior courtiers. It also mentioned something shocking. The decision follows an internal review concerning the potential risks to confidentiality and media exposure during private family gatherings. That line hit Meghan like a knife. Potential risks. Was that how they saw her? As a risk? It wasn't just exclusion, it was accusation. To her, the letter implied she couldn't be trusted, that she was a liability to royal secrets, that her presence was a threat to the monarchy's image. And that, more than anything, infuriated her. Because Meghan had built her brand around control. Control of her image. Control of her voice. Control of her truth. And now, the institution she once married into was branding her the opposite. Uncontrolled, unpredictable, dangerous. The irony burned. Harry tried to calm her down. "It's not worth it," he said softly. "They'll twist whatever you do." But Meghan wasn't listening. "They've called me every name in the book," she said, her tone sharp. "But this is them calling me a threat. And that, I won't ignore." That night, she didn't sleep. Instead, she drafted something, her own version of a letter. A counter-message. Not to the king, not to the palace, but to the world. It wasn't a statement in the traditional sense. It was emotional, personal, almost poetic. It spoke about family, forgiveness, and truth. It never mentioned Charles by name, but every line was clearly directed at him. "Family isn't defined by who sits at the table," she wrote. "It's defined by who refuses to let you eat alone." By morning, her team had turned it into a social media post, a heartfelt message about healing during the holidays. She posted it quietly. No hashtags, no PR spin, just an image of her hand holding a Christmas ornament and the caption beneath. Within minutes, it went viral. Millions of likes, tens of thousands of comments. Some called it beautiful, others called it manipulative, but everyone was talking about it. And back in London, so was the palace. Charles, upon seeing the post during his morning briefing, reportedly sighed and muttered, "Of course." Camilla, however, was less calm. "She's mocking us," she said to aides. "Every post, every appearance, it's all designed to undermine the family." But even Camilla didn't know what was coming next. Because while the king was trying to maintain dignity, Meghan was preparing to break her silence in a way no one expected. Her publicist received a call from a top U.S. television network. They wanted Meghan for a Christmas special, a segment on modern motherhood and resilience. It was subtle, harmless on paper. But Meghan saw the opportunity for what it was, a chance to shape the narrative before the palace's Christmas message aired. Harry hesitated. "Are you sure you want to do this now?" Meghan looked him dead in the eye. "If we don't tell our story, they'll keep writing it for us." The interview was scheduled for December 20th. The world didn't know it yet, but Meghan's appearance would light the fuse on the next royal explosion. Because when the cameras rolled and the host asked her the inevitable question, "Will you be spending Christmas with the royal family this year?" Meghan didn't deflect. She smiled, a soft, knowing smile. And then she said, "We weren't invited." That single line, delivered with perfect calm, shattered the facade of royal unity. It wasn't anger. It wasn't accusation. It was something more powerful, truth, spoken plainly. The interview clip hit social media within minutes. "We weren't invited" trended worldwide. The palace's phones rang off the hook. Commentators dissected her tone, her expression, her every pause. And yet, the most chilling reaction wasn't from the public. It was from King Charles himself. When his press secretary read him the quote, the king reportedly went quiet. Then, after a long pause, he said just 5 words. "She's left me no choice." What did he mean by that? His aides wouldn't say, but one insider later hinted that Charles was preparing something measured, symbolic, and final. Whatever it was, it would unfold on Christmas Day, and it would ensure the last word belonged to the crown. Because if Meghan had used her voice to reclaim control, Charles was about to use something far older, far more powerful, tradition. And when the world gathered to watch his Christmas broadcast, they'd see not just a king addressing his nation, but a father delivering a message straight to his estranged son and daughter-in-law, hidden behind words of peace and unity. Only this time, there would be no misunderstanding, because that broadcast would change everything. And no one, not even Meghan, saw it coming. It was December 20th, the night before Meghan's interview aired. Across the Atlantic, the palace was silent. But in Montecito, cameras were already being adjusted, microphones clipped, and makeup carefully applied under soft studio lighting. The moment had come. This wasn't just another sit-down with the Duchess of Sussex. It was being teased by the network as an intimate conversation with Meghan Markle on family, forgiveness, and the meaning of Christmas. To the public, it sounded harmless. To Buckingham Palace, it sounded like a ticking time bomb. The producers had promised no royal gossip, but they didn't need to ask. Meghan knew exactly what to say and what not to say to make headlines. As she took her seat opposite the host, wearing a soft ivory dress that practically glowed under the studio lights, she looked calm, serene, and heartbreakingly composed. But beneath that calm, there was strategy. This wasn't about revenge. This was about reclaiming the narrative. The host began gently. Meghan, this is a special time of year for families. What does Christmas mean to you now? A pause, a deep breath, and then, with that trademark grace, Meghan replied, Christmas has always been about love, forgiveness, and reflection. But sometimes, reflection comes with pain. It was masterful, every word soaked in vulnerability and power. The host leaned in. Will you and Prince Harry be spending Christmas with the royal family this year? The question everyone was waiting for. Meghan smiled, not coldly, not smugly, but with a tinge of sadness that felt real, almost too real. She said, softly but firmly, we weren't invited. The studio went silent. You could hear the air leave the room. That clip, just 6 seconds long, would echo across the world before dawn. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, every platform flooded with outrage and sympathy. How could they do that to them? Charles banned his own son and daughter-in-law. Family comes first, unless you're royal. Within hours, hashtags exploded. Hashtag royal ban. Hashtag justice for Harry and Meghan. Hashtag cold Christmas palace. News anchors dissected every syllable. Body language experts analyzed Meghan's micro-expressions, and royal commentators scrambled to explain the real meaning behind her words. But the truth was simpler and more devastating. She'd won the emotional war. For the first time since their exit, the public sentiment tilted dramatically in their favor. Meghan wasn't the villain this time. She was the voice of a woman quietly rejected, yet refusing to break. Meanwhile, back in London, the palace was in crisis mode. The King's press secretary reportedly received the transcript minutes after it aired in the US and rushed it straight to Charles. He read it once, slowly, then again. No anger, no shouting, just silence. Camilla broke it first. She's twisting it, she said, making us look cruel. Charles didn't respond. He simply walked to the window, staring out over the palace gardens lit by white Christmas lights. After a long pause, he said quietly, she's not twisting it. She's telling it the way she feels it. That line, overheard by an aide, said everything. Because deep down, Charles wasn't furious. He was heartbroken. This wasn't just a public spat anymore. It was a family tragedy playing out in real time. But for Meghan, the interview wasn't about pain alone. It was about power. She knew the world was watching, and she wasn't going to waste her chance to reshape the narrative. As the interview continued, she spoke about motherhood, healing, and the importance of letting go of anger, even when others hold on to theirs. Every line was crafted like a lyric, every pause intentional. At one point, she looked directly into the camera and said, I believe love doesn't disappear. It just waits for courage to return. Viewers flooded the comments. She's still open to reconciliation. She's the bigger person. She's sending a message to Charles. And maybe she was. Because for all the polished diplomacy, one thing was clear. The Duchess had just taken the moral high ground in front of millions. That same night, as the interview trended globally, Harry remained uncharacteristically silent. He didn't tweet. He didn't release a statement. He didn't even smile when Meghan tried to lighten the mood afterward. He was conflicted, torn. Because while Meghan's move had gained them sympathy, it had also deepened the rift with his father beyond repair. And then, the phone rang. A palace number. Harry froze. He hesitated, then answered. The voice on the other end wasn't his father's. It was an aide. Calm, clipped, professional. His Majesty would like to speak with you tomorrow, the aide said. Before the Christmas broadcast is finalized. Harry's pulse quickened. Tomorrow, the day before Christmas Eve. Was it an olive branch or a warning? He told Meghan about the call. Her eyes widened. Do you think he's reaching out? She asked. I don't know, Harry replied quietly. But I think it's serious. And serious it was. Because the next day, Harry took that call, and what was said between father and son would never appear in any royal transcript. But those close to the situation say it changed the entire tone of the king's upcoming speech. Charles didn't yell. He didn't scold. He simply told Harry that while he wished things were different, he could no longer ignore the impact of their choices. I have a duty, he said softly, to this country, to the crown, and to the truth. Harry reportedly replied, and I have a duty to my wife. Silence. Two men divided not by hate, but by love for two different worlds. When the call ended, Harry sat for a long time, staring at his phone. Meghan asked him what had happened. He just said, "It's over." But was it really? Because that night, as the palace finalized the king's Christmas address, something remarkable happened. Charles rewrote part of it himself. Handwritten edits. Entire lines replaced. He added one sentence that wasn't in the draft his staff approved. A sentence that would soon be interpreted as a direct message to his estranged son. And when that broadcast aired, it would leave not just the family, but the entire world speechless. But before that, another storm was about to hit. Because while Charles was editing his speech, Meghan was preparing to make one final move, one that would send the palace spinning into full panic. Her team had just received an offer from Netflix, a surprise opportunity for a live holiday special showcasing the Sussexes' version of Christmas. Cameras, candles, carols, a chance to rewrite the royal tradition in their own way. Harry hesitated again, but Meghan's response was instant. "If they won't let us sit at their table," she said, "we'll build our own." And just like that, the battle lines were redrawn, not just between father and son, but between two Christmases, one royal, one rebel. And what happened next would shake both kingdoms. Because Meghan's Christmas special wouldn't just rival the royal broadcast. It would expose a truth that the palace had fought to keep buried. And when that truth came out, it would make the letter, the ban, and even the broadcast look like child's play in comparison. But what secret could possibly be so explosive that even the king himself feared it might destroy the monarchy's image forever? You're about to find out. Because the next move Meghan made would set the stage for the biggest royal showdown in decades. One that no amount of palace PR could contain. And no one, not even Charles, was ready for it. The news broke faster than anyone expected. Within 24 hours of Meghan's interview, every major outlet in the world was running wall-to-wall coverage. Split screens of Buckingham Palace draped in frost on one side, Meghan's serene smile from the TV studio on the other. It wasn't supposed to be this loud, but nothing about this feud was quiet anymore. By the morning of December 23rd, something strange was happening inside both camps. In London, palace aides were rewriting talking points for the king's Christmas broadcast. In California, a small film crew was quietly unloading equipment outside the Sussexes' Montecito mansion. 2 broadcasts, 2 messages, and 1 unspoken war. The Montecito plan. The Netflix proposal had arrived disguised as a holiday feature. A warm, family-friendly segment highlighting charities, recipes, and carols. But behind closed doors, Meghan saw what it really was, a global stage. She told her producer bluntly, "If we're doing this, it's not fluff. It's about truth wrapped in warmth." The idea was simple yet audacious. A 1-hour Christmas special featuring Harry, Meghan, and their children, filmed around their California home. There would be a tree, a piano, maybe a quiet charity visit. But the real story, the heart of it, would be subtle commentary on forgiveness, family, and the pain of being exiled. Every line would be a mirror held up to Buckingham Palace. Harry was reluctant. He'd already made the call to his father. He'd heard the exhaustion in Charles's voice. Part of him wanted to disappear for the holidays, to protect what was left of his peace. But Meghan's conviction was unshakable. "They've told their story for generations," she said. "It's time we tell ours." So the cameras rolled. They filmed the children decorating cookies. Meghan reading a Christmas story by the fireplace. Harry sitting outside at dusk, talking about how every family has its distance. It looked wholesome. It felt wholesome. But every word carried weight. When Meghan said, "Sometimes love means walking away to protect your peace," the internet exploded. When Harry added, "Tradition without empathy is just ceremony," royal commentators nearly combusted. Because everyone knew who those lines were aimed at. By the time Netflix released the teaser, just a single clip of Meghan hanging an ornament shaped like a crown on the tree. YouTube, TikTok, and morning news shows had already turned it into global symbolism. The timing was deliberate. The Sussex special would air on December 24th, one day before the King's speech. Inside Buckingham Palace. Meanwhile, in London, Charles was finishing his final rehearsal for the annual Christmas broadcast. Normally, these speeches were pre-recorded in mid-December, but this year he delayed it, rewriting lines, changing tone, and insisting on something more personal. The palace staff could sense it. This wasn't the measured, polished monarch they were used to. This was a man walking a tightrope between love and legacy. William had been briefed earlier in the day. Are you sure you want to mention them at all? He asked his father. Charles looked up from his notes. If I ignore them, I look heartless. If I name them, I look divided. So I'll do neither. I'll speak to them, without saying their names. He paused, tapping the paper with his pen. The message isn't for the cameras. It's for them. Even Camilla, who usually stayed detached from public drama, seemed uneasy. They'll twist whatever you say, she warned. Charles smiled faintly. Then I'll say it in a way they can't twist. That line would later send chills through every royal watcher who heard the broadcast. The eve of the broadcast. As Britain prepared for Christmas Eve, two screens dominated living rooms around the world. One showed Montecito, bathed in California gold. The other, Buckingham Palace, cold and stately in its timeless grandeur. When the Sussex Christmas special premiered, it broke streaming records within the first hour. The opening sequence showed Harry and Meghan walking along a beach with their children. The music was soft, nostalgic. Meghan narrated, "Sometimes, the people we love most are the ones we must love from afar." It was cinematic, painful, poetic. Midway through the special, the tone shifted. The couple spoke about service, how real service is measured in compassion, not ceremony. Audiences wept. Royal correspondents raged. And somewhere in his study, Charles watched the entire thing, alone. He didn't call anyone afterward. He simply underlined a line in his speech draft and circled 2 words in the margin: forgiveness endures. The next day, when the cameras rolled for the king's broadcast, his demeanor was calm but distant. He spoke of unity, of compassion, of finding peace, even when those we love have taken different paths. Viewers everywhere froze. Was that it? Was that the message? Harry watched it live. Meghan sat beside him, silent. The king continued, voice steady, eyes fixed on the camera. Christmas reminds us that love is not measured by proximity, but by intention. May those who feel far from home know they are never forgotten. That was it. The olive branch, hidden beneath royal composure. Harry looked down. Meghan stared straight ahead. Neither spoke. And then, in a moment that no one expected, Charles added one final, unscripted line, one that wasn't in any palace draft. He said, "My family, wherever they are, remains in my heart." The production crew paused, unsure if it was a mistake. But Charles didn't flinch. The cameras kept rolling. The broadcast aired as is. The world erupted. Some called it an act of forgiveness. Others saw it as guilt. But everyone agreed. It was the most emotional Christmas speech by a monarch in modern history. And yet, the peace it offered would last less than 48 hours. Because the next morning, something unexpected surfaced. A video clip, grainy, leaked, from the behind-the-scenes filming of Meghan's special. In it, Meghan could be heard saying, off camera, "They want forgiveness to look like surrender. I'm done surrendering." The clip was less than 10 seconds long, but it was enough. The British press went wild. "Meghan mocks the king's olive branch," screamed one headline. Within hours, Buckingham Palace released a short, icy statement. His Majesty's Christmas message speaks for itself. And just like that, the fragile truce shattered. Because this leak wasn't random. It wasn't accidental. It came from inside the production. Someone close to the Sussexes had betrayed them. But who? And why? The answer to that question would expose one of the most shocking betrayals in royal history. One that would pit loyalty against survival and reveal that the true enemy wasn't across the ocean at all. It was standing right behind them. It was Christmas morning, and the palace was supposed to be at peace. The king's Christmas speech had gone out to the world, touching millions. But inside those stone walls, tension was at an all-time high. Because somewhere in the shadows of the royal family's inner circle, someone had betrayed the crown. The leak from Meghan's production, those 10 damning seconds, hadn't just embarrassed Buckingham Palace. It had reopened old wounds. And this time, it was personal. When the clip reached William, he was livid. "Enough is enough," he snapped, slamming his phone down in front of his private secretary. "This can't keep happening. Not every holiday. Not every year." To the public, William had kept quiet for months, the image of composure and restraint. But behind palace doors, the patience had worn thin. Because this wasn't just about family drama anymore. It was about trust. And in William's eyes, Harry had broken it beyond repair. He reportedly called his father immediately. "You can't keep letting them use your words, Dad," he said. voice low but seething. They take every gesture you make and turn it into ammunition. Charles, ever the measured monarch, simply replied, "And what do you suggest I do, William?" "Ban forgiveness." But William wasn't looking for forgiveness. He was looking for order. To him, this wasn't a story of love lost. It was a war for the monarchy's survival. He'd spent years watching the headlines, the documentaries, the interviews, the memoirs, every revelation from Harry and Meghan chipping away at the family's credibility. And now, on the holiest day of the royal calendar, they'd done it again. That's when William made a decision that would change everything. He would confront his brother directly. No press, no aides, no cameras, just the two of them. The last time they'd spoken face-to-face had been over a year ago, and it hadn't ended well. Words were shouted, tears were shed, but this time, William wasn't coming to negotiate. He was coming to draw the line. He called Harry that afternoon. The call was short. "I need to see you," William said. Now, hours later, in a quiet corner of Windsor, the two brothers met in private. No one else knew the exact location, just a small lodge once used by their grandmother for private retreats. Harry arrived first. He looked tired, pale, guarded. The last few weeks had drained him. William entered minutes later, his expression unreadable. For a moment, neither spoke. Just silence, the kind that feels heavier than any words. Finally, William broke it. "Do you even understand what you've done?" Harry frowned. "You mean the broadcast?" "I mean all of it," William snapped. "The leaks, the interviews, the constant attacks. You've turned every private moment into public drama." Harry's eyes narrowed. "Public drama? You think I leaked that clip? I didn't even know about it until this morning." William stepped closer. "Then who did? Because it came from your set, your people." Harry shook his head. "We're not the only ones with enemies, Will." That line hung in the air like smoke. William studied his brother, the man who had once been his closest ally, now his most unpredictable opponent. "You've changed," he said quietly. Harry shot back. "No, I finally stopped pretending." It was like watching two worlds collide, duty versus freedom, silence versus truth. For years, their mother's memory had been the one thing binding them together. But even that felt fractured now. "I kept quiet for Mom," William said. "For her legacy. But you're burning it down." Harry's voice cracked. "You don't get it. I'm not trying to destroy anything. I'm trying to survive it." The argument spiraled from there, decades of resentment pouring out in minutes. Childhood favoritism, press manipulation, Camilla's influence, the constant weight of comparison. And then, a moment of raw honesty. William lowered his voice. "You think you're free, but they're using you, Harry. The people funding your projects, producing your shows, they don't care about you. They care about the story. And once it's done, they'll move on." Harry's response was soft, almost broken. "At least they let me tell my story." That silence again. Thick, suffocating, final. Then William said it. The words that would echo across the family long after the doors closed. "Maybe that's why you're not invited back. Because none of us can tell where your story ends, and ours begins." He left without another word. Harry stood there for several minutes after, staring at the door, his chest rising and falling in quiet rage. He didn't call Meghan right away. He didn't call anyone. He just walked outside into the freezing night air and looked up at the stars over Windsor, the same sky he and William had once watched as boys, side by side, before everything changed. And for a fleeting moment, he thought about their mother. What she would say if she could see them now. Would she tell them to forgive? Or would she tell them to fight for the truth, no matter the cost? But that thought didn't last long. Because later that night, as Harry returned to London before flying home, another storm was already brewing. One that would drag his father, his brother, and his wife into the most scandalous royal revelation since the 1990s. A palisade had found something. Something buried deep in internal records. Something that proved the leak. The clip that reignited this entire feud didn't come from California at all. It came from inside the palace. And the name attached to it was someone no one ever expected. Because when that name leaked, the story shifted overnight. And suddenly, the king's Christmas message wasn't what anyone was talking about anymore. They were talking about betrayal, about deceit, about how far a royal would go to protect the crown, even if it meant destroying their own. And as the headlines erupted, one phrase began circulating in whispers through royal corridors. Buckingham Palace had seen its share of scandals, but not like this. This was different. This wasn't an affair, a leaked photo, or a bad headline. This was internal sabotage, an act of betrayal that cut straight to the throne. And at the center of it all was Queen Camilla. At least, that's what everyone was whispering. The leak of Meghan's off-camera remark, "They want forgiveness to look like surrender. I'm done surrendering," had come from a restricted communication channel used only by the palace's senior staff. That channel, according to insiders, was overseen by none other than Camilla's private office. When word reached the king, he went pale. Not angry, pale. Because he understood exactly what this meant. If the rumors were true, the monarchy's biggest scandal in years wasn't caused by Harry or Meghan. It was born inside Buckingham Palace itself. He summoned his private secretary immediately. "Is this verified?" The aide hesitated. "Not yet, sir. But the source appears connected to the Queen's communications staff." Charles closed his eyes. "Find out. Quietly." But there's no such thing as quietly in the palace. Within hours, senior courtiers were already whispering, staffers were deleting messages, and reporters were circling like hawks. Was it possible that Camilla, Britain's once vilified, now redeemed queen, had orchestrated the leak herself? Some called it unthinkable, others inevitable. Because if there was one person in the palace who understood how public image worked, it was Camilla Parker Bowles. She'd spent decades mastering it, transforming herself from the other woman into the steady hand beside the king. And now, as the monarchy faced another storm, people wondered, had she pulled the strings one more time? Inside the Queen's office. That morning, Camilla's staff were on edge. She'd called an emergency meeting, a rarity for the holidays. The door closed, the curtains drawn. She stood at the head of the table, holding a printout of the leaked transcript. Her tone was sharp, controlled, almost icy. "Who sent this?" she demanded. "Who passed this to the press?" No one spoke. "I will not have this institution humiliated again," she continued. "And if anyone in this office believes they're serving the king by undermining his family, they are gravely mistaken." Her words sounded righteous. But to those in the room, something about the performance felt rehearsed. Because Camilla wasn't just protecting the monarchy. She was protecting herself. The truth was, her relationship with Harry and Meghan had never recovered after Spare. Harry had referred to her as dangerous in the book, a woman who traded information to improve her image. And now, with the leak pointing in her direction, that quote suddenly looked prophetic. As the investigation deepened, one junior staff member cracked. They admitted to forwarding the clip to a friend in the media. But when pressed further, they added something chilling. "I didn't do it for me. I was told it would stabilize the narrative." "Who told you that?" the investigator asked. The staffer hesitated, then whispered, "A senior aide in the Queen's office." That was enough to send Buckingham Palace into full lockdown mode. The palace spins. By evening, headlines blared across British tabloids. Queen Camilla's office linked to leak scandal. Royal family in turmoil as investigation points inward. Did Camilla undermine Harry and Meghan's peace attempt? The public was stunned. The king was devastated. And Camilla? She was furious. "Do they really think I'd stoop to this?" she snapped during a tense exchange with Charles. He didn't answer immediately. He just stared at her. "Do you?" she pressed. He sighed. "I think you underestimate how much people want to believe it." It wasn't a denial. And that cut deeper than any accusation. For all her power, Camilla had always known her position was precarious. Public forgiveness was conditional. One misstep could unravel decades of rehabilitation. So she did what she'd always done best. She fought back. That same night, her team quietly began reaching out to select journalists, ones who'd been loyal to her since the early 2000s. Sources close to the Queen started leaking counter-narratives. The Queen is being scapegoated for a mistake made by lower staff. Camilla has no involvement in leaks and is devastated by false accusations. Focus should be on family healing, not blame. It worked, partly. The press softened. But behind the palace gates, suspicion lingered. Even William wasn't convinced of her innocence. He'd never fully trusted Camilla, not since the early days. To him, she represented everything that tore their family apart. And now this? A betrayal disguised as loyalty? It fit the pattern too neatly. One insider claimed William told a friend, "If this came from her side, then she's done more damage than Harry ever could." Charles at the breaking point. For the king, the timing couldn't have been worse. He'd spent weeks trying to mend his fractured image with the Christmas speech, only for his own household to implode days later. By December 27th, he'd had enough. He called a private meeting with his senior advisors, and, for the first time, he didn't defend Camilla. "She cannot keep using the media as her shield," he said quietly. "If this is connected to her office, I want it handled permanently." Handled, in palace terms, didn't mean firing. It meant containment, reassignments, quiet departures, non-disclosure agreements. But the press wasn't done. They were already preparing a second wave of stories, this time not about the leak, but about the marriage itself. Rumors began swirling that Charles and Camilla had argued furiously over Harry's treatment, that the king had considered a separation of offices. Public sympathy, once in her corner, began to shift again. And through it all, one person watched from afar, Meghan Markle. When her team sent her the latest headlines, she didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just said quietly, "They're turning on each other now." For years, the Sussexes had been blamed for every royal scandal. But now, the chaos was internal, and that made it far more dangerous. Because when a monarchy starts eating itself, no one is safe, not even the queen. And yet, as the palace scrambled to repair the damage, another shock was about to hit. A revelation that would expose just how deep the betrayal went. Because one of the deleted files from Camilla's office wasn't deleted completely. It was recovered. And what it contained wasn't just proof of the leak. It was proof of a plan. A detailed communications memo titled, "Narrative Control, Christmas 2025 Strategy." And the first bullet point under Camilla's initials read, "Neutralize Sussex narrative before royal broadcast." That line was damning enough. But the next one was worse. Use selective leak of audio clip, Meghan, to reassert palace credibility. Ensure Charles appears sympathetic. It was there, in black and white. She'd done it. The Queen had authorized the leak. The woman once accused of manipulating public opinion had just been caught doing it again, only this time, against her own family. And when the king saw the document, his reaction wasn't fury. It was heartbreak. He whispered just 5 words. "I can't believe she did it." But she had. And what came next would tear the royal household apart all over again. Because once the truth became undeniable, someone would have to take the fall. And this time, it wouldn't be Harry. The tabloid front pages hit the stands like a royal earthquake. The Queen's dirty Christmas secret. Camilla exposed. Leaked memo proves palace cover-up. King Charles betrayed from inside. The damage was total. Overnight, the monarchy's carefully preserved holiday calm dissolved into chaos. Television networks ran emergency specials. Royal commentators couldn't keep up. The Queen's office shut down all press inquiries, but silence only made it worse. For the first time in modern royal history, Buckingham Palace was the story, and not in the way anyone wanted. Inside the palace, the mood was apocalyptic. Staff whispered in corridors, shredders ran all morning, and every computer was suddenly under security review. The king's press secretary described the atmosphere as a funeral without a body. Camilla's closest aides were gone by noon. Officially on leave, but everyone knew what that meant. The memo was real. It had been verified. The Queen had done it. She'd ordered the leak of Meghan's private remarks, thinking it would make Charles look sympathetic and reaffirm his dignity after the Sussexes' Netflix special. Instead, it detonated the monarchy's credibility. Even senior courtiers, usually loyal to the death, were shaken. "We survived Diana. We survived Andrew," one said bitterly. But this is rot from the inside. The king's reckoning. Charles didn't speak publicly. Not yet. But those close to him described a man utterly broken by disappointment. He'd spent his entire life defending Camilla's reputation, through scandal, through protest, through decades of hostility. And now, in one stroke, she'd undone it all. That evening, he called her into his study. No aides, no guards, just them. The moment she entered, she started to speak, her usual measured defense, but he raised his hand. "Please," he said softly. "Not this time." She froze. He turned away from her, looking out the window toward the courtyard where photographers had camped for years. "Do you know how long I fought for peace?" he asked quietly. "For this family, for you, for the crown?" Camilla said nothing. Charles continued. "You didn't just betray them. You betrayed me." He finally turned to face her. His expression wasn't angry. It was exhausted. The kind of exhaustion that comes from loving someone too long, too fiercely, and realizing it might have been for nothing. "You've won every battle except the one that matters," he said. "The one inside this house." Her voice cracked. "I did it for you." "No," he said. "You did it for control." The silence between them was heavier than thunder. The world reacts. Across Britain, the public turned. Polls that once showed steady approval for the royal couple plunged. Commentators who'd spent years rehabilitating Camilla's image now hesitated to defend her. Online, the hashtags told the story. Hashtag Camillagate. Hashtag leaked by the crown. Hashtag Charles deserves better. Even longtime royalists couldn't spin it. "This is the first time in living memory," one veteran journalist said, "that the monarchy looks less stable than its critics." And across the Atlantic, Harry and Meghan watched the fallout with mixed emotions. They weren't celebrating. It was too surreal. For years, they'd been branded as the villains, the destroyers of tradition, the ones who hurt the crown. Now, the same press that vilified them was tearing Camilla apart. Meghan's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Every outlet wanted her reaction. Every network wanted her exclusive. But she refused. "We don't touch this," she told Harry firmly. "Let them eat their own." Harry, however, wasn't so calm. The idea that Camilla, the woman who'd haunted his childhood memories of his mother, had orchestrated this scandal made his blood boil. He'd tried to forgive. He really had. But this reopened every wound. He paced their living room, fists clenched. "She used us. Again. Just like she used everyone else." Meghan put a hand on his arm. "Then let the truth speak for itself." But the truth had only begun to surface. Behind closed doors. At Sandringham, where the king had retreated for a few quiet days, there was no peace. He spent hours walking the grounds, accompanied only by a single aide. According to sources, his conversations were half resentment, half remorse. "How did we get here?" he reportedly asked one morning. "How did family become a war zone?" The aide didn't answer. He already knew that the royal family was bracing for a new crisis. Parliament was beginning to ask questions. Because the leaked memo didn't just mention Meghan and Harry. It referenced media strategy partnerships between the Queen's office and several unnamed outlets, raising questions about potential misuse of public funds. In other words, this wasn't just scandal. It was potentially illegal. The story was snowballing faster than anyone could contain it. For the first time, the government's press liaison reached out privately to the palace, advising that clarity was needed to protect the institution. In royal code, that meant someone needs to fall on their sword. Camilla knew what was coming. By the next morning, she'd quietly canceled all public appearances. Her press office announced she was taking time to reflect, but reflection wasn't going to save her. That afternoon, a senior palace aide, one of Charles's oldest confidants, visited her privately and delivered the message she'd been dreading. "His Majesty believes it is in everyone's best interest if you step back from duties temporarily." Camilla's response was sharp. "Temporarily?" He nodded. "That's how it will be phrased." Behind those words lay a truth everyone understood. Temporarily could last forever. The king's statement. The next day, the palace issued a short, carefully worded statement. "His Majesty the King and Queen Camilla have agreed that Her Majesty will, for the time being, withdraw from public engagements to allow space for family unity and institutional reflection." It didn't say suspension. It didn't say exile. But it might as well have. The reaction was immediate. Some praised Charles for taking action. Others saw it as weakness. But the one headline that summed up the moment came from The Guardian. "The king who chose the crown over his queen." For Charles, it was the most painful decision of his reign. But he believed it had to be done, because the monarchy couldn't survive another betrayal. But the cost of saving the institution was the destruction of his marriage. And in Montecito, Meghan read that line again and again, whispering to Harry, he finally did it. He finally chose the crown. The unintended consequence. But here's where it all turned again. Because even as Camilla retreated from the public eye, her allies didn't. Several former aides, now cut loose, began leaking their own stories, painting Camilla not as a schemer, but as a scapegoat. She was told to manage the press, one claimed. Everyone knew. The king knew. The implication was explosive. If Charles had sanctioned her media operations, or even benefited from them, Then the blame didn't stop with Camilla. It went straight to the top. Suddenly, whispers began spreading. Was the king's noble act really damage control for something he knew all along? The press called it the Charles Clause, the theory that the king had sacrificed his wife to preserve himself. And once that idea took root, the sympathy he'd earned from his Christmas speech evaporated overnight. The monarchy was back in crisis. Again, and this time, the damage wasn't coming from Harry and Meghan. It was coming from the king himself.